Chapter 1, Cold Rooms and Warm Invitations. Sarah Jenkins liked the cold room because it did not expect anything from her. The temperature was maintained at a precise 36 degrees Fahrenheit, a number she trusted. The hum of the refrigeration unit was constant, dependable, and entirely uninterested in conversation. Inside, artifacts rested in orderly suspension. Bone fragments, stone tools, preserved fibers, each tagged, catalogued, and placed exactly where it belonged. Sarah moved among them with the calm efficiency of someone fluent in silence. She wore gloves even when she didn't strictly need them. Habits, like preservation methods, existed for good reasons. At 28, Sarah was already one of the museum's most reliable archaeologists. Not because she was ambitious in the traditional sense, but because she was exacting. She did not guess. She verified. She did not embellish. She described. Her reports were concise to the point of elegance, and her supervisors had long since stopped asking her to add more color. Sarah understood color. She simply preferred accuracy. She adjusted the overhead light and leaned closer to a shallow tray holding a series of worked stone fragments. Prehistoric, local, functional, honest. Her phone vibrated in the pocket of her lab coat. Sarah paused. The museum had taught her the value of interruption discipline. She finished aligning the tray, noted the time on her clipboard, and only then removed her gloves before retrieving the phone. Unknown number. She considered letting it go to voicemail. Then she noticed the area code. Familiar. Academic familiar. She answered. Jenkins. There was a brief pause, followed by a breath she recognized before the voice attached itself to the sound. Sarah. Hi. It's Daniel Mercer. She closed her eyes, not in irritation, but in recalibration. Daniel Mercer existed in a carefully filed mental drawer labeled college/competent/pleasant. She opened that drawer now. Hello, Daniel, she said. It's been several years. He laughed softly. That does sound like you. Yes. About 6, unless we're counting conference sightings. I don't, she said, and meant it neutrally. Another pause. Then, I'm calling because I have something you're going to want to hear. Sarah leaned against the stainless steel table. Proceed. He did not tease her. Daniel had always known better than that. We've confirmed it, he said. A fully intact woolly mammoth, locked in ice since the late Pleistocene. Tissue, hair, stomach contents. The preservation is extraordinary. The world tilted. Just slightly. Sarah's grip tightened on the edge of the table. She did not gasp. She did not exclaim. But something in her chest expanded so abruptly it was almost painful. You're certain, she said. Yes. Carbon dating? In progress. Preliminary results align with stratigraphy. The site is stable. Location. Northern region. Remote, but accessible with the right team. She inhaled once, deeply, and exhaled through her nose. When would excavation begin? Daniel smiled on the other end of the line. He could hear it in her voice, the way her questions sharpened, how the cadence shifted when she was excited. We were hoping you'd say that. Late January. We want you leading artifact stabilization. Yes, Sarah said. He blinked. I haven't finished the... Yes, she repeated firmer. Then, realizing she should provide context, she added, assuming my institution approves a sabbatical. They will, Daniel said without hesitation. Sarah allowed herself a small, private smile. They will require hosting rights for a future display. We anticipated that. Good. She glanced once more around the cold room, at the quiet patience of objects that had waited thousands of years. Her voice softened, just slightly. Thank you for calling me. I've been looking forward to it, Daniel said. And then, more carefully, I've been looking forward to seeing you again. She acknowledged that with a thoughtful silence rather than a response. Daniel did not rush her. After they disconnected, Sarah stood still for a full 10 seconds. Then she pressed her fingertips briefly to her eyes. Almost cried. She thought, mildly surprised. The museum director listened without interrupting. Sarah appreciated that. A mammoth of this preservation level, the director said finally, would be unprecedented for our region. Yes. And you're confident in the team? I know Daniel Mercer's work. His standards align with mine. That more than enthusiasm sealed it. The sabbatical was approved with conditions. Sarah accepted them with a nod. By the time she returned to the cold room, the hum of the refrigeration unit sounded different. Not louder, not warmer, just anticipatory. Across the state, Daniel Mercer sat back in his chair, phone still in his hand, staring at nothing in particular. She'd said yes before he finished the sentence. He laughed quietly to himself, equal parts delighted and terrified. Loving Sarah Jenkins had always been a study in patience. She was brilliant, self-contained, and utterly uninterested in what did not matter to her. The fact that she mattered to him had never seemed like something to impose. Soon, he thought. Soon, she'll be here. And maybe, just maybe, this time she'd look up. Chapter 2, Packing for the Ice Age. Sarah Jenkins approached preparation the way she approached research, by eliminating variables. Her apartment was spare but not austere, arranged with intention rather than decoration. Bookshelves lined one wall, overloaded, double-stacked, organized by subject rather than author. The kitchen table had been repurposed into a staging area, where lists lay neatly aligned beneath a paperweight shaped like a trilobite. She reviewed the first list. Cold weather gear verified. Field tools, redundant sets prepared. Personal items, minimal. She checked each item off with a precise stroke of her pen. There was no nervous energy in her movements, no pacing. Anticipation, for Sarah, manifested as clarity. Her phone chimed. She glanced at the screen. Daniel Mercer. She answered on the third ring. Yes, I was hoping I caught you at a good time, he said. I am packing. That's always a good time for you, isn't it? She considered. Objectively, yes. He laughed. I'm in town. Sarah paused mid-checkmark. You are early. By 4 days. That seems inefficient. I had reasons. She resumed checking items. State them. Well, he said. I thought I might help you prep, or at least observe. You always did have the most thorough systems. She pictured him smiling. That familiar expression that suggested both admiration and amusement. You are not required. I know. Another pause. Longer this time. However, Sarah added, if you are already here, you may as well come by. I am inventorying duplicates. Daniel exhaled in relief. I'll be there in 20 minutes. 30, she corrected. Parking is unpredictable. 30, he agreed. When she ended the call, she stared at the list for a moment before checking off the last item. She did not ask herself why she'd invited him. The decision had been efficient. He was a known quantity. That was enough. Daniel arrived carrying coffee and an expression of restrained delight, as though he were trying very hard not to spook a rare animal. Hello, Sarah, he said, standing just inside the doorway. Hello, Daniel, she replied, stepping aside. You may put the coffee there. She pointed to the counter. He complied immediately. Her apartment smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. Daniel took it in with quiet appreciation. You've rearranged, he said. Yes, for optimization? For stability, she corrected. The shelves were exceeding load tolerance. Of course they were. She gestured to the table. I am preparing redundancy kits. You may assemble thermal packs if you wish. Happy to, he said, rolling up his sleeves. They worked in companionable silence for several minutes. Daniel followed her instructions precisely. Sarah noticed. She always noticed. You're very calm, he said eventually. I see no reason not to be. Most people would be vibrating by now. She glanced up. Most people are not specialists. He smiled. Fair point. He hesitated, then added, You know, when I first saw the scans, I thought of you immediately. That was appropriate, she said. He laughed again, softer this time. You haven't changed. She considered that. Neither have you. That's debatable. Your methodology remains sound, she said. You still drink coffee you don't need. Okay. That's unsettlingly accurate. She allowed herself the faintest curve of amusement. They finished packing sooner than expected. Efficiency compounded when both parties respected process. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Dinner? No. He blinked. No. I have already eaten, she clarified. At 1700 hours. Oh, right. He paused. What about tea? She considered. The kettle was already full. That is acceptable. They sat with their mugs, steam curling between them. You ever think, Daniel said, about how strange it is that something can wait tens of thousands of years, and then suddenly be urgent? Sarah's eyes sharpened. Frequently. And that we're the ones who get to meet it? Yes. He watched her as she spoke. How her focus intensified. How her voice lowered when something mattered. You were always like this, he said. In the field, I mean, completely present. She looked at him now, really looked. He had more lines at the corners of his eyes than she remembered. He seemed steadier. You were observant, she said. About you, he replied without thinking. Silence fell, not awkward, but weighted. Sarah broke it first. You are still observant. He nodded, a little embarrassed. That night, after he left, Sarah stood by the window longer than necessary. She did not analyze the interaction. She simply catalogued it. Noted. Daniel Mercer is unchanged in competence. Noted. Interaction produced no inefficiency. Noted. Mild unfamiliar awareness. She wrote none of this down. The flight north was uneventful. Sarah preferred it that way. At the small regional airstrip, the rest of the team gathered 6 people, all capable, all vetted. Daniel moved easily among them, offering brief introductions, making space rather than filling it. Sarah approved. The transport vehicles cut through white terrain, the horizon a clean, uninterrupted line. At the site, wind swept low across the ice, sharp but not hostile. Sarah stepped out of the vehicle and stood very still. This, she said quietly, is optimal. Daniel watched her profile, the way the cold flushed her cheeks, how utterly at home she looked in the open. We'll begin perimeter checks in the morning, he said. She nodded. I will want to review the ice stratification personally. I expected nothing less. As she walked toward the temporary structures, Sarah felt something unfamiliar settle. Not distraction, not doubt. Possibility, she realized. She did not resist it. Tomorrow there would be work. And beneath the ice, something ancient waited. And this time she would not be alone. Chapter 3, White Horizons. Morning at the site arrived without ceremony. The sky was a pale, unbroken gray, the kind that flattened distance and made the world feel both enormous and close enough to touch. Wind slid across the ice in low, whispering sheets. The temperature was well within tolerances, which Sarah noted with approval as she stepped out of the temporary structure and pulled her hood higher. She stood still for a moment, boots planted, eyes scanning the perimeter. This was good terrain, honest terrain. Behind her, the site began to wake. Zippers, muffled voices, the metallic clink of equipment. Sarah did not join the chatter. She reviewed the landscape again, orienting herself to subtle variations in ice color and texture. Daniel approached with a tablet in one gloved hand. Perimeter markers are holding, he said. No overnight shifts. As expected, she replied. The pressure gradient is stable. He smiled. You say that like it's comforting. It is, she said, already moving toward the flagged grid. They split into teams. Sarah took point on stratification assessment, a role no one questioned. She knelt at the edge of the marked dig zone, brushing loose frost aside with careful strokes. The ice here told a story if you knew how to listen. Layers compressed by time, trapped air bubbles, faint discolorations, organic matter, ancient and patient. She traced a line with her finger. Here, she said. Daniel crouched beside her immediately. This layer, she continued, indicates a rapid freeze event, which supports minimal tissue degradation. That's where the scans suggested the thoracic cavity was most intact, he said. Yes. They exchanged a look, not celebratory but aligned. Hours passed quickly. Sarah lost herself in methodical progress, her movements economical, her attention absolute. The world narrowed to ice, tools, and incremental revelation. This was where she was most herself. Not distant, not reserved, but fully engaged. Daniel watched her work from across the grid. She was precise without being rigid, adaptable without improvising recklessly. When a junior team member hesitated, Sarah stepped in, not with authority, but clarity. Your angle is correct, she said calmly. Your pressure is not. Reduce it by a third. The adjustment worked immediately. Thank you, the woman said, visibly relieved. Sarah nodded once and moved on. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Pride, he thought, and something older, steadier. By midday, the upper ice layers were cleared enough to expose a faint curve beneath the surface. Sarah stopped. Everyone stopped. She lowered herself closer, breath fogging the shield of her visor. That, she said softly, is hair. No one spoke. Daniel broke the silence first, voice low. Confirmation. Yes, she swallowed. Coarse guard hair. Orientation suggests flank or shoulder. The mammoth was there. Not abstract. Not theoretical. Present. The team resumed work with reverent care. An hour later, the weather shifted. The wind sharpened, rising in pitch, carrying fine ice particles that stung exposed skin. Sarah registered it immediately. Pause, she said. All teams. Daniel looked up. You want to call it? Temporarily, she said. This is not yet unsafe, but it will degrade visibility. As if to underscore her point, a sudden gust caught the edge of a temporary barrier, wrenching it sideways with a metallic shriek. Daniel, someone called. He was already moving. Sarah stood, scanning rapidly. The barrier had loosened near the secondary access path, close to where one of the newer technicians was standing, frozen in indecision. Move back, Sarah said sharply. Now. The technician hesitated half a second too long. The barrier tipped. Daniel lunged forward, but Sarah was already there. She grabbed the technician's harness and yanked her backward, the force jarring up her arm. The barrier crashed into the ice where the woman had been standing moments before. Silence fell hard and fast. Are you injured? Sarah asked, steady but loud enough to cut through shock. The technician shook her head, eyes wide. No, I'm fine. Good. Sarah turned to Daniel. Secure the remaining barriers. Reinforce with secondary anchors. On it, he said. The team moved quickly, efficiently. Within minutes, the site was stable again. Inside the main structure, heaters hummed and breath slowed. Sarah sat on a bench, removing her gloves with controlled movements. Her hands were shaking. She noticed. She did not comment. Daniel approached, holding out a cup of heated electrolyte solution. Drink. She accepted it without argument. That was fast thinking, he said. It was necessary. And effective. She took a sip, then another. Her pulse gradually steadied. You pulled her back with a lot of force, Daniel continued. Your shoulder. It is fine. He raised an eyebrow. She sighed, then rotated her arm once. Mild strain. I'll take mild, he said. They sat in silence for a moment. You didn't hesitate, he said finally. There was no time to, she replied. No, he agreed. But not everyone moves like that under pressure. She looked at him then, meeting his eyes. You did. A flicker passed between them. Recognition. Mutual assessment. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For trusting me to finish what you started. She considered that. You are reliable. The words landed heavier than she intended. Daniel felt it too. Outside, the wind eased. Work resumed, slower now, more deliberate. By late afternoon, enough ice had been cleared to reveal the unmistakable curve of a massive shoulder, hair still embedded in frozen time. Sarah stood over it, breath shallow. You okay? Daniel asked softly. Yes, she said. Then, after a moment, she added, this is significant. He smiled. That might be the understatement of the decade. She almost smiled back. That night, the team gathered for a simple meal. Conversation flowed around logistics and timelines. Sarah listened, contributed when necessary. Daniel sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence without it intruding. You know, he said quietly, you never used to sit this close to anyone. She glanced at him. That is an observation. Not a complaint, he said quickly. Just noticing. She nodded, accepting that. Later, alone in her assigned sleeping quarters, Sarah lay awake longer than usual. Her body was tired, but her mind remained alert. She replayed the day, not the discovery, but the moment of motion, of instinct. The way Daniel had moved. The way he had looked at her afterward. She did not label the feeling that followed. She simply acknowledged it. Tomorrow there would be more ice to clear, more history to uncover, and perhaps she thought something closer to the surface than she had realized. Chapter 4, The Mammoth in the Ice. By the third morning, the mammoth was no longer an idea. It had shape now, weight, curvature, presence. Ice was cleared in deliberate stages, each pass revealing more of the body that had waited beneath the surface for tens of thousands of years. The work demanded patience and restraint, virtues Sarah possessed in abundance. She knelt at the edge of the exposed section, her breath slow, controlled. The shoulder was fully visible now, massive even in partial reveal. The hair lay flattened but intact, dark against the pale blue of the ice. It did not look dead so much as paused. Document before we proceed, she said. Cameras were raised. Measurements recorded. No one rushed. Daniel stood just behind her, hands clasped loosely, watching not the mammoth but Sarah's face as she worked. There was a stillness to her now that felt different from her usual focus, deeper, almost reverent. This preservation, she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else, suggests rapid burial followed by immediate freeze, likely fell through thin ice near a meltwater channel. You sound like you're telling its story, one of the technicians said. Sarah glanced up. I am. The evidence allows it. Daniel smiled. That was her, exactly. Facts first. Meaning followed. They advanced slowly through the day, revealing the mammoth's flank, then part of the ribcage. When the first curve of a tusk emerged, pale and immense, the team fell silent again. Sarah reached out without thinking, then stopped herself inches away. She withdrew her hand, curling her fingers into her palm. Daniel noticed. He always did. Do you want to do the honors? He asked gently. She hesitated. I should not compromise protocol. You won't, he said. You'll document it properly. But this is your specialty. Your moment. She looked at him, searching his expression for expectation or pressure. There was none. Only steadiness. She nodded once. With deliberate care, Sarah brushed ice from the tusk, the tool moving in small, controlled arcs. The ivory surface gleamed faintly beneath her touch, unmarred by time. There, she said softly. Growth rings are visible. We may be able to estimate age with unusual precision. The mammoth was no longer just intact. It was knowable. That evening, exhaustion settled over the camp like a heavy blanket. The work had been physically demanding, but the emotional weight of discovery lingered longer. Dinner was quieter than usual. Sarah ate methodically, her mind replaying details, the angle of the tusk, the compression of the ribs, the way the ice fractured along natural fault lines rather than damaging tissue. Daniel watched her push food around her plate after the first few bites. You didn't eat much, he said. I ate enough. That wasn't a question. She paused. I am processing. He nodded. Fair. They stepped outside together afterward, the cold sharp but clean. The sky had cleared, revealing a scatter of stars that seemed almost intrusive in their brightness. Daniel exhaled slowly. I forget how loud the world is until I'm somewhere like this. Sarah tilted her head back, tracking a familiar constellation. Silence has texture here. He smiled. You always did hear things other people missed. She looked at him again, curious. You say that as if it were past tense. He met her gaze. Habit. They stood shoulder to shoulder, close enough that the space between them felt intentional. I wanted to say something, Daniel began, then stopped. Sarah waited. She was good at waiting. When we were in school, he continued, choosing his words carefully, I admired how focused you were. You never seemed distracted by things that pulled everyone else off course. That was not deliberate, she said. I simply did not see value in those distractions. I know, he said. That's what I admired. She considered that. You admired my lack of interest in social conventions. I admired your clarity, he corrected. There's a difference. She absorbed that in silence. I don't expect anything from you, he added quickly. I just wanted you to know that working with you again has reminded me why I respect you so much. The words were measured, careful not to tip into confession. Sarah recognized the restraint and found herself unexpectedly grateful for it. Respect is mutual, she said. Your leadership here has been effective. He laughed softly. That might be the most genuine compliment I've ever received. She allowed herself a small smile. Then you are welcome. Later that night, Sarah returned to the main structure alone. She reviewed the day's documentation, her handwriting precise but slightly tighter than usual. When she finished, she sat back and closed her eyes. Images surfaced unbidden. Not just the mammoth, but Daniel's expression when he watched her work. The way he had offered space without withdrawing. The steadiness of him. She did not know what to do with that yet. She slept deeply, dreams filled with ice and bone and something warmer beneath it all. The following day brought a challenge. As the team prepared to expose the thoracic cavity, Sarah noticed subtle stress lines forming in the surrounding ice. Stop, she said immediately. Daniel looked up from the far side of the grid. What is it? Microfractures, she replied, already moving closer. They're spreading faster than predicted. That section was stable yesterday, one of the technicians said. Yesterday, Sarah echoed. Conditions have shifted. Daniel crouched beside her. Risk assessment? If we proceed without reinforcement, we risk collapse into the cavity, she said. Damage would be irreversible. A murmur rippled through the team. Daniel straightened. Then we don't proceed. We will lose time, someone protested. We will preserve integrity, Sarah countered calmly. Daniel nodded. We reinforce. Sarah, outline what you need. She did quickly and precisely. The team moved to comply. When the area was secure, Daniel approached her again. You didn't hesitate, he said. There was no reason to, she replied. The data was clear. He studied her face. You know, not everyone can stop momentum like that without flinching. Momentum is only valuable when it is controlled. He smiled. I keep forgetting how much I like the way your mind works. She felt that again, that unfamiliar warmth, low and steady. As the day wore on, the mammoth revealed more of itself. The thoracic cavity remained sealed, but the outline was unmistakable. At dusk, Sarah stood alone at the edge of the dig, staring down at the ancient form. You waited, she murmured, so quietly she wasn't sure anyone could hear. And you endured. Daniel appeared beside her, silent as the falling snow. For the right moment, he said. She glanced at him. Yes, they stood there together, two figures framed against ice and history. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to wonder, not about the past, but about what might survive into the future. Chapter 5, Fault Lines. The pressure did not arrive all at once. It accumulated the way ice stress did, quietly, invisibly, until the structure could no longer pretend it was stable. The call came just after breakfast. Daniel listened with his back to the main structure, satellite phone pressed to his ear, his posture rigid in a way Sarah had learned to recognize as restrained irritation. She watched from across the workspace, cataloging specimens with methodical care while tracking his tone rather than his words. Yes, he said. I understand the funding implications. Pause. No, that timeline is not realistic. Longer pause. Because the mammoth is not a line item. Sarah set her tools down. When he ended the call, he didn't turn immediately. He stood there, shoulders squared, breathing once, deep and deliberate before facing the site again. They want acceleration, he said. She nodded. They always do. Media interest is increasing. Sponsors are restless. There's talk of bringing in an external review team. Sarah's jaw tightened. That would compromise continuity and introduce unnecessary handling. Daniel agreed. I said no. You do not sound finished saying no. I'm not. She stepped closer. Explain the pressure vectors. He exhaled, then shifted into problem-solving mode without hesitation. They want partial extraction of the thoracic cavity within 48 hours. Enough for preliminary scans and publicity images. That is irresponsible, she said immediately. Yes, the ice matrix is not yet reinforced for that depth. I know. Then refusal is the only viable response. Daniel met her eyes. They are not going to like it. I am not concerned with their preferences. A corner of his mouth lifted despite the tension. That might be my favorite thing about you. She did not respond to that. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead. We can offer an alternative, she said. High-resolution surface imaging combined with subsurface tomography. It buys time and data without destabilization. Daniel considered it. They'll argue it's insufficient. Then they are uninformed, she said calmly. which is correctable. He watched her for a beat, admiration undisguised. You want to take that call with me? Yes. The call was scheduled for midday. Sarah prepared for it the way she prepared for everything else, by assembling facts. She reviewed stress analyses, temperature fluctuation data, microfracture mapping. When she spoke, she did not raise her voice. She did not hedge. This specimen has survived because of equilibrium, she said evenly. Disrupting that equilibrium for speed would be an error. There were objections. There were veiled threats. There was talk of optics and investment. Sarah did not blink. Optics do not outweigh preservation, she said, and investment is meaningless if the subject is destroyed. Silence followed. Then, grudgingly, concession. When the call ended, Daniel leaned back in his chair and laughed. Not loudly, but with genuine relief. You were terrifying, he said. She removed her gloves. I was precise. Terrifyingly precise. That afternoon, tension lingered in the air, but the work proceeded uninterrupted. Reinforcement continued. Measurements were taken twice, then verified by a third party. Sarah insisted on it. No one argued. By evening, exhaustion set in. Not the clean fatigue of physical labor, but the heavier kind that followed prolonged vigilance. The team dispersed early. Sarah remained at the edge of the dig, reviewing notes by headlamp. She was so focused she did not hear Daniel approach. You're still working, he said quietly. Yes. He hesitated. You don't have to be alone out here. She looked up at him. I am not alone. Something in her tone gave him pause. Not dismissal. Clarification. He nodded and sat beside her on the equipment crate. They worked in silence for several minutes. You know, he said eventually, when we were in college, I used to think you didn't notice much beyond your field. She did not look up. That was incorrect. I know that now, he said. But back then, I assumed your quiet meant disinterest. She closed her notebook. My quiet meant processing, she said. It still does. He turned toward her fully. Can I ask you something? She considered. You may. Do you ever regret not pursuing things? The question was careful but not casual. She thought before answering. Regret implies error, she said. I do not believe my choices were erroneous. But, he prompted gently. But, she continued, there are experiences I did not prioritize because I did not understand their relevance at the time. And now, she met his gaze. Now I am re-evaluating. The honesty landed between them, unembellished and unmistakable. Daniel swallowed. Sarah, I need to be clear about something. She waited. I have cared about you for a long time, he said. Not in a way that expects anything, and not in a way that competes with what you love. But it's real. The words were quiet, steady, no flourish. She absorbed them slowly. I did not know, she said. I figured, he replied, a faint smile touching his mouth. You weren't looking. No, she agreed. I was not. And now? He asked, not pressing, just asking. She searched herself, not for certainty, but for truth. Now, she said carefully. I am aware. He nodded. That's enough. She frowned slightly. Enough for what? For me to wait, he said. Or to step back. Whichever you need. The choice settled into her chest with surprising weight. I do not require you to step back, she said. His breath caught just slightly. But, she added, I cannot proceed without understanding. Understanding what? What this would mean, she said. I do not approach relationships impulsively. He smiled then, full and genuine. I would expect nothing less. They sat there as the wind traced quiet lines across the ice. Later that night, Sarah lay awake again, but this time her thoughts were not circular. They moved forward, connecting points she had previously kept separate. She thought about patience, about waiting, about the difference between distraction and discovery. And she realized, with calm certainty, that something had shifted. Not cracked, shifted. Chapter 6, What Survives. The turning point arrived without drama. No alarms sounded. No ice cracked. No one raised their voice. It arrived instead in the form of readiness. By the 6th day, the mammoth was fully stabilized for extraction preparation. Reinforcement scaffolds held firm. Temperature and pressure readings aligned across all monitors. The thoracic cavity, once the center of contention, was now safely accessible. Sarah stood at the edge of the dig, tablet in hand, reviewing the final verification sequence. All readings are within tolerance, she said. We may proceed. The words landed with weight. Daniel exhaled slowly beside her. All teams, you heard her. Movement resumed, careful and reverent. Tools engaged with precision. Ice was removed millimeter by millimeter, revealing the sealed curve of the ribcage. Sarah descended into the shallow pit herself, her movements unhurried. She knelt, placing one gloved hand against the ice near the cavity. Not touching the mammoth, but close enough to feel the cold radiating from it. Document everything, she said quietly. This phase will not be repeated. Daniel watched her from above, a familiar tension coiling in his chest. Not fear this time, but awareness. This was the culmination of her work, of years of redirected passion, of patience shaped by constraint rather than lack. The cavity opened cleanly. Gas samples were taken first, then tissue, then carefully contents, ancient grasses, preserved beyond reason. Sarah closed her eyes for half a second when the first sample was secured. "It worked," someone whispered. "Yes," Sarah said. "It did." By late afternoon, the most delicate phase was complete. The mammoth remained intact. Its story, once trapped in ice, had begun to speak. The team gathered briefly inside the main structure, quiet awe threading through their fatigue. "You did it," Daniel said to Sarah once they were alone. "We did," she corrected. He smiled. "You always say that. It is accurate." He studied her face. "Are you happy?" She considered the question seriously. Yes. The word felt solid, uncomplicated. That night, the team celebrated modestly. Hot food, shared stories, laughter that came easier now that the pressure had eased. Sarah participated more than she usually would have, listening, contributing short observations that drew smiles. Daniel noticed. Later, when the camp had quieted, Sarah stepped outside alone. The air was still. The ice reflected starlight in subtle gradients, no longer blinding, but inviting. She walked slowly, boots crunching softly, until she reached the edge of the secured dig site. The mammoth lay beneath layers of reinforced insulation now, protected, waiting once more. "You endured," she murmured again, the words meant for herself as much as the ancient creature. "And you were worth the wait." "Talking to the mammoth?" Daniel asked gently from behind her. She did not startle. "Yes, good," he said. "I'd be disappointed if you weren't." He joined her, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed. "I'll be honest," he said after a moment. "I was worried early on that once the work reached this stage you'd pull back again." "From what?" "From everything that wasn't the mammoth." She turned to face him fully. "That would have been consistent." "And did you?" "No." He searched her expression. "Why not?" She thought carefully before answering. "Because I am beginning to understand that preservation does not require isolation." The words felt new, but not fragile. He nodded, accepting them without embellishment. "I want to be clear as well," she continued. "I do not experience attachment in the way most people describe it. I do not miss easily. I do not yearn instinctively." "I know," he said. "But," she went on, "I am capable of choosing. Deliberately." Daniel's breath caught just perceptibly. "And I am choosing," she said, "to explore this." He did not speak for several seconds. "Sarah," he said finally, voice steady but low, "you have no idea how much that means to me." "I believe I do," she replied. "But I am still calibrating." He laughed softly. "Fair." They stood together, the cold sharp between them, but something else present now. Something warmer, steadier. The next morning brought logistical finalization. Transport arrangements were confirmed. Preservation protocols reviewed. The mammoth would be moved in stages, each one documented exhaustively. Sarah oversaw everything. When the final crate was sealed, she rested her palm against the reinforced surface, feeling the vibration of the cooling system beneath it. "Safe," she said. Daniel stood beside her. "You did that." "Yes," she agreed. "And I will see it again." The return journey felt different. The landscape was the same, white, vast, uncompromising, but Sarah felt altered within it. Not lighter, not distracted, expanded. At the regional airstrip, the team dispersed with handshakes and quiet goodbyes. Daniel and Sarah boarded the same flight, seats adjacent by coincidence or design. She did not ask which. As the plane lifted, Sarah looked out the window, watching the ice recede into abstraction. Daniel glanced at her. "What happens now?" She did not hesitate. "The museum, the exhibit, continued collaboration. And us?" She turned toward him. "Us," she said, "will proceed slowly, with clarity, and without unnecessary assumptions." A smile spread across his face. "That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." She considered that. "Then you are welcome." As the plane leveled, Sarah reached for her book, then stopped. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap and allowed herself to sit in the quiet presence beside her. Not alone, just accompanied. Chapter 7, The Museum After Hours. The museum smelled the same as it always had. Stone dust, climate-controlled air, a faint trace of old paper and polish, familiar, grounding. Sarah noticed it the moment she stepped inside, coat still buttoned, gloves tucked neatly into her pocket. The front hall was quiet at this hour, echoing faintly with the distant hum of systems working to preserve the past. She approved. Her return had been efficient. Debriefings completed. Preliminary reports submitted. The sabbatical paperwork closed with minimal friction. The mammoth's arrival was scheduled in stages, the first transport already en route under conditions she had personally verified. Sarah stood in the central exhibit hall, tablet in hand, surveying the cleared space where the display would eventually rise. "Lighting will need adjustment," she murmured. and reinforcement beneath the west platform. Already noted, Daniel said from behind her. She turned, unsurprised. He had arrived earlier that afternoon, ostensibly to review transport documentation, though she suspected, accurately, that was not the only reason. You walk quietly, she said. I learned from the best. She inclined her head, accepting the compliment. They moved together through the exhibit space, discussing load distribution, visitor flow, interpretive text. It was easier than it should have been. Their collaboration had slipped seamlessly from field to institution, as though it had always belonged here. At one point, Sarah stopped in front of a glass case housing prehistoric tools. I remember this display, Daniel said. You curated it. Yes. You argued for the asymmetrical layout. It reflected usage patterns and confused the donors. She allowed herself a brief smile. They adjusted. He watched her as she studied the case, her expression thoughtful, almost fond. You seem different, he said. She did not look at him. Different how? More present here. You used to treat the museum like a holding facility between projects. She considered that. Perhaps I was waiting. For what? She turned to him then. For context. He nodded slowly. And now I have it. They moved into the conservation wing, where the cold room awaited. Sarah keyed in the access code and stepped inside, the familiar chill wrapping around her like a well-fitted coat. The space was unchanged. Artifacts rested in orderly suspension. The hum of refrigeration was steady, impartial. She closed her eyes briefly. Daniel stood just inside the doorway, respectful, observant. This is where I work best, she said. Silence, precision, time. I know, he said. I don't want to disrupt it. You are not, she replied immediately. You are adjacent. The word felt intentional. They stood together, the cold sharpening the air between them. I've been thinking, Daniel said carefully, about what you said, about choosing. She waited. I don't need things to move quickly, he continued. I don't need declarations or milestones. I just want to be included. She turned to face him fully now. Inclusion, she said, requires consistency. I can do that. And honesty. I'm very good at that. And patience. He smiled softly. I've had practice. She studied his face, the lines at his eyes, the steadiness she had come to rely on without realizing it. I would like to attempt something, she said. He straightened slightly. Okay. She stepped closer, not abruptly, not hesitantly, but with deliberate intent. I would like, she continued, to integrate you into my routine. His eyebrows lifted. That sounds serious. It is, she said. You would attend planning sessions, review drafts, share meals, occasionally sit in silence without speaking. He laughed quietly. I can handle that. There may be long stretches where my attention is elsewhere, she added. This does not indicate disinterest. I know. And when I do reach for you, she said, her voice lowering, it will be because I have chosen to. The silence that followed was not empty. Sarah, Daniel said softly, that's all I've ever wanted. She nodded, then hesitated just once. This part, she said, gesturing vaguely between them, is unfamiliar. That's okay, he said. We'll be careful with it. She considered that. Then, with the same precision she applied to every meaningful action, she reached out and took his hand. Her grip was steady. The contact sent a quiet jolt through both of them. Not fireworks, not drama, but recognition. Yes, she said, as if confirming a hypothesis. They left the cold room together. Over the next days, the museum shifted from preparation to anticipation. Crates arrived. Climate controls were recalibrated. Sarah oversaw every step, her focus unwavering. But now, when she looked up, Daniel was often there, offering input, sharing responsibility. One evening, long after closing, they stood in the exhibit hall as the first section of the Mammoth's display framework was installed. It will be impressive, Daniel said. Yes, Sarah agreed. But that is not the goal. No, the goal, she said, is accuracy. He smiled. Of course it is. She glanced at him, then corrected herself. And meaning. That night, as they walked out together into the cool city air, Daniel reached for her hand again. She did not hesitate. She had not lost herself in this. She had expanded. And for the first time, the quiet she loved felt shared. Chapter 8, Quiet Joy. Opening night arrived without spectacle. That was intentional. The museum doors opened at precisely 1800 hours. The lighting had been calibrated to a soft gradient, cool enough to preserve, warm enough to invite. The exhibit hall carried a low, anticipatory murmur, the sound of many people holding their voices slightly in check. Sarah stood just beyond the threshold of the hall, tablet tucked under her arm, posture straight, breathing even. She wore a dark blue dress, simple in cut, practical in fabric. It was not an attempt to impress. It was appropriate. Daniel noticed immediately and, more importantly, noticed that she did not fidget. You're ready, he said quietly, standing beside her. Yes. You're not nervous. she considered. I am alert. He smiled. That tracks. They stepped into the hall together. The mammoth dominated the space, not aggressively, but undeniably. Its massive form curved through the exhibit, tusks arcing forward, hair preserved in astonishing detail. Interpretive panels flanked the display, concise and precise. No dramatization, no exaggeration, accuracy. Visitors moved slowly, instinctively lowering their voices. Children stared wide-eyed. Adults leaned in, reading every word. Sarah observed them the way she observed everything else, not for validation but for comprehension. Were they understanding? Were they learning? The curator approached, beaming. Attendance is already exceeding projections. That is acceptable, Sarah replied. Daniel hid a smile. At 1900 hours, Sarah was called forward. She stepped onto the small platform without hesitation. The room quieted. She did not wait for silence to be complete, only sufficient. My name is Sarah Jenkins, she said, voice steady and unadorned. I served as lead archaeologist for the excavation and preservation of this specimen. She paused, allowing the words to settle. This mammoth survived not because it was extraordinary, she continued, but because conditions allowed it to endure. Preservation is not a matter of luck. It is a matter of balance. She spoke briefly about methodology, about restraint, about listening to evidence rather than imposing narrative. She did not mention herself beyond necessity. She did not dramatize the past. And yet, the room was entirely focused. When we uncover history, she concluded, our responsibility is not to claim it, but to care for it. Thank you for witnessing this moment with us. She stepped back. The applause was immediate but respectful. Sarah accepted it with a nod, then returned to Daniel's side. You were brilliant, he said. I was clear, she corrected. That too. They spent the next hour moving through the crowd. Sarah answered questions with precision. Daniel translated enthusiasm when necessary. They functioned as a unit without discussing it. Later, when the museum began to empty, they found themselves alone again in the exhibit hall. The mammoth loomed quietly above them, unchanged by the attention it had drawn. Sarah stood with her hands clasped behind her back. It is strange, she said, to finish something this large. Daniel nodded. Endings can feel disorienting. This is not an ending, she replied. It is a transition. He looked at her. You've been saying things like that a lot lately. Yes. They walked slowly along the length of the display. You know, Daniel said, if you had asked me in college how this would go, I never would have guessed this. She glanced at him. What would you have guessed? That you'd change the field, he said. Which you did. I just didn't think I'd be standing next to you when you did it. She stopped walking. So you are pleased, she said. He laughed softly. Very. She turned toward him fully, her expression thoughtful. Daniel, she said, I have reached a conclusion. He straightened slightly. Okay. I do not experience romance as a disruption, she continued. I experience it as an addition, provided it does not require me to diminish myself. I would never ask that, he said immediately. I know, she replied. That is why this works. She took his hand again, this time without analysis, without hesitation. This, she said, is my choice. He squeezed her hand gently. Then it's mine too. They stood there together beneath the quiet weight of history. Later, after the museum lights dimmed and the doors closed, they walked out into the city night. The air was cool, the street calm. Daniel stopped at the curb. Dinner, she considered, then nodded. Yes, that would be enjoyable. He smiled, something bright and unguarded in his expression. As they walked, Sarah felt no loss of solitude, no erosion of self. She felt, instead, the steady comfort of something chosen carefully and preserved well. Like the mammoth, like this. And she knew, without drama, without doubt, that some things, when tended with patience and respect, could endure far longer than expected.